Hi everyone and welcome to Safe Space. Joining us today is the wonderful Anna and a very special guest, Luna, everybody. Round of applause, please. We wanted to talk a little bit about the experience of pregnancy, childbirth, parenthood, and obviously we've been locked down. We've not had much chance to really talk about what happened and how intense it all was. Of course, before you're going into it, I think there's a lot of parents don't always want to tell you exactly what it's like because they don't want to worry you. And people don't, want to influence each other's decisions about what they're going to do, pain relief wise and all that sort of stuff. So it kind of creates this stigma, I think, around it all. And so we thought that perhaps doing this might be a little bit cathartic for us, and also it might help some of you if you're thinking about parenthood or on your way towards it. So, shall we?
Yeah. I think, before we start, I just thought I'd continue that point about sort of positive birth. Because I know quite a few people who've had probably what would be, oh, bless you, what would be, she lost a sneeze.
It's the worst, isn't it?
What would be perceived as being a negative birth, or it's not gone the way that they wanted, and then they've been told, I mean, in like hypnobirthing classes and things, you're told to, only listen to positive birth stories, and I think that that's probably really damaging for people who've had a traumatic birth to feel like they're silenced and they're not allowed to talk about their birth story. And I think that we need to reframe that idea, because for me, I'll say now that my birth was traumatic, but I think also positive, because at the end of the day you've got a gorgeous, squishy, healthy baby, and so how is that not a positive birth story? And we're so lucky that we have got her and that we've been able to have her, and I think although this might seem like a negative birth story, it's really not, and I think that that's important, that people feel like they can share those stories and not feel silenced.
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree more. So I guess then we'd done a little bit of the video before Christmas, before she arrived, but then she was quite overdue, and then we were in hospital for about a week, weren't we? So should we start with after due date, before she came along? Yeah.
I guess really, I mean, I was all right up until obviously due date came and went. I know you thought that she'd be here by Christmas or by due date, and I was absolutely adamant that it was going to be a while after due date. But it wasn't until those last 2 weeks of being overdue that I was really uncomfortable, really. Like, that was when my mobility got quite hindered, and I'd started to get some sciatic pain.
You were limping everywhere.
Yeah, I really couldn't walk very well. And I remember I kept thinking, God, if she'd just been born on a due date, I wouldn't be in this much pain.
Yeah. You never thought she was going to arrive, did you?
No, and I did. It was such a strange time between due date and her arriving, because you're just waiting.
You've worked towards a date that you're so sure is going to happen.
And it's silly, and you read all these books and read all these articles, and they say the due date it is a guess. Like, I think it's about how many? 5%.
5%
are born on due date. So it's like it actually, the likelihood is the baby's not going to be born on the due date. No. You shouldn't be working towards that date at all, but you can't help but get it fixed in your mind. And it was a really weird limbo. Like, didn't know when it was going to happen. Didn't know. And people obviously waiting for it to happen as well, and I think that can sort of make you feel a bit, she's not been born yet, and I think that was quite a difficult time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was. I think as well there was a few trips. Good one. Where they measured you and said,
"Oh yeah,
she was going to be like huge."
Yeah. So my final midwife appointment, I think it was.
Well, they'd always said she was going to be small, hadn't they? They'd always said.
Just before they booked the induction, I went for a midwife checkup, and she said that my bump was measuring really big, so I had to go to hospital. And she said that the baby was measuring at 9 pound. So obviously I absolutely freaked out. Went to the hospital. This was a week before my due date, and they said, right, well, we can either do a scan and see how big she is, or see if you've got excess fluid, or we can just book an induction for your due date. And I was still hoping she'd come naturally, so I didn't book the induction then, and I opted for the scan, and then the scan showed that she was average.
But they'd always said
fluid.
that she'd have tiny legs, hadn't they? And on all of the measurements, they said it wasn't concerning, but she had little legs and she'd probably be really short. And then, didn't they say, when they measured you, that they mentioned diabetes, didn't they? They mentioned...
Yeah, because if you're measuring big, it can, or if there's excess fluid, it can be a sign of gestational diabetes.
So I remember there was a few days where you were just imagining that you had this ginormous
huge baby, and I had diabetes.
And you had diabetes. And so I think there was that couple of weeks wasn't too great, was it?
No,
really?
No, it was a worry, and it seemed to go on forever. Yeah, and then there was a couple of instances of high blood pressure, and towards the end, if you have high blood pressure, you have to go to the hospital to get checked. So I felt like I was just in and out of hospital without actually anything happening.
Yes.
So it was a bit of an annoying time.
It was a bit, wasn't it? So then induction was booked on what day was it?
The induction was booked for the 2nd of January.
Yes, that's it.
So final midwife checkup, booked my induction. I thought, yes, we're going.
That's another date that we can be sure about.
I know that that's going to happen. I know it's happening now. I know that's when it's going to happen. I mean, I had concerns about the induction because, you hear stories, you hear that it's more painful. You hear about stories of inductions happening too quickly, and then obviously with COVID, I was worried about you being sent home, and then suddenly she'd be born in 10 minutes and I was on my own. So I wanted to get there on the 2nd of January, and you were allowed in 8 till 8, was it? Daylight hours.
Yeah.
8 till 8 you were allowed in. I thought, right, she's got until 8 p.m. to get here. As long as she's here by 8 p.m. tonight, everything will be fine. And even my midwife had said to me when we booked the induction, because I'd said I'm really worried about the amount of how painful it will be, and she said, you've just got to think it's one day and it's over in one day. So I was thinking,
that's going to happen
right,
one
she
day
needs
then.
to be here by 8 p.m. tonight. Sam will still be there then. And, I just need to get through this one day. Ha.
That didn't happen like that, did it?
It was. I mean, the start of the induction, it was very stop-start, wasn't it? It was very. I mean, first of all, her heart rate was. I can't remember whether it was too fast or too slow. It was erratic, basically, which meant that I had to stay on the bed while they monitored me for about 9 hours. I couldn't move off this bed.
You've got to keep looking at this machine. You've got these bands on, and you're waiting to see if this heartbeat goes up or down.
Yeah, and then when it goes up or down, they need to keep you on longer.
And also, because of where she was, they couldn't. You had to lie still so that the thing could keep reading. Because if you moved, oh man, that was intense. That felt like it went on forever.
Especially because that's when the contractions started.
Yeah.
So not being able to move whilst having contractions was really, really, really difficult, and I started to really get quite grumpy.
You.
And then you didn't go through it. And then just as I thought we were sort of getting somewhere, I was like, these contractions are every few minutes. They were. Somebody came in. It was Karen. Karen, who did my booking appointment, my 8-week booking appointment. Then did our hypnobirthing course. Walked into our room when the induction had started, and she said, "I'm looking after you." So we were like, "Oh." But she came in and she went, "Can you feel the contractions coming right quite quickly?" I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Yeah, we need to stop the induction. They're not real contractions. They're overstimulated. Happened too quickly. You're not going to progress." So they had to stop the induction and then restart it again.
The next day,
yeah. Luckily they'd let you stay over, hadn't they?
Yeah.
So then I thought, well, at least you've been able to stay overnight, and at least it's going to be the next day, which was the 3rd of January. So they started the induction again, and then it was just slow.
Constant,
really
ongoing,
slow,
but really slow.
Very, very sort of no sort of pattern to the contractions. and I kept doing things that would relax me, because the whole point of this stage of labour is you're supposed to be at home at this stage of labour, and being in your own environment makes you feel more comfortable, which helps labour to come on.
Yeah.
And I was in this room, then we weren't allowed to leave the room. So, doing things that make you feel relaxed and happy is really difficult.
But we've been in so long that we were running out of supplies of nice food.
You had no food, yeah, running out of clothes.
Yeah.
So then I was having a bath. I was having lots of baths to make me feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But they completely stopped the contractions. I think it was about 12 hours that I didn't have a contraction for.
So then we had to go another night, didn't we?
Yeah, so I sent you home. I said, right,
go get a shower.
You're going to need to go get a shower, get some
stuff.
food, get some sleep. I wasn't sleeping really. I managed to get a couple of hours that night when you were
here.
You were here, yeah. And I got to the next day, so this was the 4th of January. And they'd examined me and said, we can break your waters now. So we're just waiting for a space on labour ward. I mean, the night that I sent you home, we expected to be going to labour ward. And the midwife had actually said to you on your way home, where are you? How far away are you?
Yeah.
We'll ring you when there's a space on labour ward. So I was sort of waiting that night for somebody to come in, but there's just nobody did. And that's the other thing about these COVID times. You can't just pop out and ask for somebody, or I literally would go 12 hours without seeing a person. And in this room, and I was fine, there was nothing wrong, I didn't need checking on. But that's a really strange place to be in.
When you thought you'd be in and out.
You do feel, the end of the world could be happening outside the room, and
well,
you've got no idea.
It turned out we went into lockdown, didn't we?
Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, then finally there was, a space on labour ward. And that was, on the 4th of January, we were able to go to labour ward in the afternoon.
Yes. And that felt like, right, now, this is really happening now.
Yeah.
We're off.
Yeah, and that's when really my hypnobirthing. I mean, the hypnobirthing really, really helped throughout the whole induction process. Really, from like the internal examinations, actually administering the induction, and then on labour ward, just keeping calm.
Yeah.
And you could do things to your room. We had lovely fairy lights. We'd hung like affirmations everywhere.
We knew what to expect.
Made it a nice environment.
We knew what to expect from the biology, what was going on.
Yeah.
I just don't think we were prepared for the time.
No.
The duration.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, the
hypnobirthing definitely came in handy, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, when we got to labour ward, I had my waters broken, and I was put on a drip, to induce the labour, and that meant that I couldn't have a water birth. So my birth plan had pretty much gone completely out the window at that point, which kind of felt like some control had been taken away there.
Yeah, I was amazed at how well you did with that, to be honest, because you seemed to take that in your stride. But I knew that you would be disappointed.
That's what I really wanted to have the water birth. She's gone to sleep. So, and I'd put on my birth plan that I'd want a water birth, and ideally I didn't want any pain relief. I'd have gas and air, and I would consider other pain relief as a very last resort. That really.
Where the pain relief at?
Yeah, as soon as they started turning that drip up.
Yeah.
I mean, I say as soon as it was a long time.
Oh, and
it was
gradual. It's amazing what they do. They just beep. It's a machine, and they just slightly up the amount by a fraction, and you can feel the contractions get stronger
and closer together. At first, I had an injection. I had a pethidine injection,
which is painkiller.
Which is a painkiller. I didn't do anything. No. I didn't.
I think you noticed it for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it was strange. It wasn't really a painkiller. It was just more of a spaced out feeling.
Yeah.
But so I don't know whether I was just too spaced out to react to the pain.
Yeah.
I could definitely still feel the pain.
Yeah.
And it didn't last very long.
The gas and air, you barely.
Gas and air. I did have some gas and air for the examinations.
Didn't really do it.
And I didn't like it.
No.
I didn't like it, and I thought that I'd be fine with that.
I loved it. No, I don't.
And no, I didn't like it. So I didn't use that. I opted to do some of the examinations without anything because it, didn't.
You weren't getting on with it, were you?
Really strange feeling. Made you really hot and feel sick as well, so I think that might have been it. And then about when contractions were really strong, couldn't speak through them.
That was I couldn't believe that. I couldn't believe how long they went on, and I couldn't believe how intense they were. And I just it felt like we weren't getting anywhere, didn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it was that the midwife said at that point, she said, I don't think your contractions are going to get any stronger now, or closer together. So they were happening pretty much every minute, every 2 minutes. But you've still got a long way to go. You've still got quite a few hours of this because, baby isn't actually anywhere near being born. So is there any other pain relief you'll consider? And I just was like, give me
what you got?
And then this poor anaesthetist came in and said, are you struggling? I can't talk.
Do you want to keep your arms?
There's a few times when you had to be like, I don't think she can speak at the moment.
No, he was asking you questions. I couldn't tell if he was asking you questions to test how bad the pain was.
Maybe actually, I never thought about that. But also he had to read this. They've obviously got an obligation, a duty to read all those side effects, and you have to respond to let you know you understand them. But it was just a bit like,
yeah, I'm like, that means yes. When she screams in pain, that's yes.
Yeah, but for me, an epidural was. I really didn't want one before. Obviously, going into hospital on my birth plan was I don't want an epidural. I'll consider it as a very, very last resort. Have an epidural.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? I think everybody's different, and I think everybody's experience will be different. Some people will go in and it'll work really quickly, and perhaps I've heard people going for induction and it's too fast for them to have the epidural. You go past that stage.
It completely depends on your situation.
But for you, it was game changer, wasn't it?
Yeah, completely. I as somebody. Before I went into hospital, the thought of having an epidural, so the thought of having a needle put into your spine, the thought of knowing that you can only have an epidural at a certain point, so I knew that contractions would be happening by then. The thought of trying to control my contractions while somebody put a needle in my spine was a really terrifying thought. But actually, all I wanted was the pain to stop when it came to it, and having the actual epidural. Having the needle, I can't feel the thing at all.
They were very, very, very professional, quick.
And very quick.
And within minutes, you felt
completely
better, and you still retained a lot of feeling and control.
Could still feel the contraction, so I knew when I was having a contraction, but it didn't hurt. So that was, and I was able to just have a little doze as well, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So then it felt like. Well, obviously knowing how long it took after that, I couldn't have gone another second, to be honest, without that epidural. So then that's kind of when the complications started to come into play a little bit.
Yeah. Heart rate. Couldn't get an accurate reading because of the motion. Every time you rolled over and moved, we couldn't get a good reading of her heart rate.
So again, we had the situation where I had to be stuck. I had an epidural. I couldn't actually get off the bed anyway, but I had to be strapped to the bed. Well, not strapped, but have the straps on, monitoring her. And then they decided to put a clip on her head because they couldn't monitor the heart rate properly. So they literally attach a tiny little. It's like a little hook, and it does insert into their skin on their head, which sounds awful.
It's such a weird thing to watch someone do. Go, right, hang on a minute, and then it's on, and you're like, no, and then they just tape it to the side of your leg, and that stays there.
And then they couldn't
get a perfectly accurate heart rate.
But her heart rate kept dropping, and so every time it dropped, they had to take a sample of blood from her head and run it through a machine, which told them everything about her.
So they go in and scratch, and then a pipette of blood, and then out they go, and then they come back, and then we're just sort of waiting, hoping it's all okay, and then they come back.
Say, everything's fine. But every time that happened, they had to do that. So I think
Hourly.
about 5 or 6 times they took blood from her. So this was over a course of 15 hours. So I was on the
And I think she kept sort of retracting, didn't she? Because you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Someone was sort of coming at you.
Yeah. So they kept examining me, and very, very slow, if any progress every time. And we're talking 2 or 3 hours in between each examination. And it got to the point where they said, we'll give it another couple of hours, and then we need to think about a C-section. And at that point, I was concerned that I wouldn't have the energy to actually push if it came to it.
You've been going out for 4 days. She'd been,
yeah,
and you could tell the drops in they were worried that she was too tired to make it.
That she wouldn't cope with it. And then, like you'd said, she'd started to try and move away from the entrance, as it were. From we can say cervix here, can't we? Just tried to move
Safe
away
space.
from
cervix is fine.
From cervix, so effectively it wasn't progressing, it was going backwards. It was regressing. So at about 3 o'clock in the morning, they came and said, right, I think essentially the induction's failed. And
I mean, they left it at your choice. I think they said, we can keep going and we can keep caring for you, but they became a bit more clear that it was the right thing to do.
Well, no, because I mean they had said, it's up to you. If you want to do this naturally, then that's fine. But then that was before the final examination, right. And then after the final examination,
I think it's time to get this baby out or something, isn't it?
Her out.
Yeah.
And at that point, I just wanted her to be born. I'd been there for 4 days. I'd already been feeling like in the early stages of the induction, because that went on for so long. Like, is she ever going to be born? And that sounds like such a ridiculous thing to say. Like, of course she's going to be born. But I just was like, when?
Best part of a week, just in artificial light, prodded, poked, not really moved around much. It was a long experience, and then the speed that it went from that to her being here. But I think I must admit, I think we've been talking now for 23 minutes. Oops. So I think we pause there and we come back and do a part 2 about sort of the birth and after the birth and stuff like that. If you're happy with that.
Yeah.
So thank you for watching. We will be back with more from Anna and Luna. But until then, safe travels, and we'll see you soon.